So my project is called Bartleby, A Call for Humanity. Bartleby the Scrivener, A Story of Wall Street, was written in 1853 by Herman Melville. He tackled controversial topics head on that questioned antebellum society. The public was so shocked by his earlier work, he is denounced in reviews, even called a lunatic for his imaginative and satirical portrayal of, even called immoral. This is when he began writing short stories such as the one I'll be discussing today. The account of Bartleby is a short story that makes big implications about his antebellum society that holds significance to us now more than ever. Basically, it covers an eccentric copyist that begins in a law official's office that doesn't exactly fit in. He's very solitary, and in his solitude, it makes it very hard for him to function normally in the conventions that he finds himself in. He focuses on trying The narrator focuses on trying to give account of his ambiguous employee who is seemingly devoid of any earthly attachments or explanations, and how this causes friction with him and his own earthly attachments, namely his status quo and day-to-day functionality. The dynamic between these characters leaves the reader with a question, a social need, which the narrator attempts to address. The story presents an inherent social obligation we all have to one another, the natural connection between one man and another, and the sense of responsibility one feels to inhibit the well-being of another in lieu of this connection. It does so first by addressing what stifles it, then presents the reader with characters who are capable of responding to the responsibility. What holds man back? Melville focuses on two main things that prevent man from addressing this obligation or even realizing that it has been placed on him. Social mechanics. We all exist in some degree within a social, societal system, which all come with specific expectations about our roles and how we fit into them. This is not inherently bad, but as a whole, people may become more committed to their participation in these systems than any other aspect of their life. They become mechanical pieces defined by their operation, not their humanity. And he also covers pride and selfishness. This is what pushes us farther into our mechanics, places maintenance of self over acknowledging need in others, while pride often keeps us from addressing that need, even if it is realized. Noel addresses man's mechanical nature. He presents mostly flat, repetitive characters who are bound by the parameters of their usual routine. The other employees at the law office are described entirely in respect to their cyclical nature, specifically each of their moods, which were so predictable the narrator compared them to clockwork and how their work and how these dominated their work and interactions. Turkey is an older man that works in his office who he knows in the morning time he can always count on, but by the evenings he's very ticky, he gets angry, he doesn't work well, he's very messy. And Nippers, his other employee, he is the opposite. He comes in the mornings and he's very ticky. He's not a morning person. He can't be relied on as well in the mornings, and he's good by the evening time. The relationship between these characters and the narrator shows how being so comfortably enveloped in our singular mechanics impedes on the ability to authentically perceive outside of them. The narrator regards them in very impersonal terms. Aside from their moods, he addresses their attire and their workmanship, as these both pertain to him at work, but he does not attempt to regard them in any personal fashion. Even the names never give real names. He seemingly regards them only as tools, the efficiency of their mechanics and how they might impose on him. They almost seem normal. This may seem normal. However, that default approach to life and the disregard that keeps it running smooth is what is being addressed. Bartleby is another very flat, cyclical character, basically void of familiar substance that would make any complete character. This is because Bartleby can almost completely be summed up by his preoccupations with his solitary system. Where the narrator neglects to reflect the other employee's character in a deeper manner, for Bartleby, nothing beyond his preoccupations can be attained from his character. Bartleby's rigid interactions represent an extreme case of the nature being discussed. He is so consumed by his own ideals, he completely disregards anything that may disrupt him from his solitude. Uh, this can especially be seen toward the end of the story when the narrator offers to let him stay in his home and he is shut down by Bartleby's expected preferences. Though the narrator is a more dynamic character than the others, initially he still finds himself tightly nestled in his own standard dealings. The peace this provides him is his own prerogative, never allowing the emotions or antics of another to encroach on that. States he prefers not to work in the public eye, but in the cool tranquility of his snug retreat. The next thing Melville depicts that stifles our intrinsic duty is selfishness. The narrator provides us a prime example as he is torn between his personal pride and his desire to do right by his young employee. When he initially begins to feel like he needs to accommodate Bartleby, he immediately goes back into his self-centered dealings when his colleagues make remark about the strange creature he keeps in his office. How is this obligation depicted? So with all of this working against the characters, how does Melville present the obligation in his story? He provides the audience with a character who calls for this social need to be answered, which is our main character, and one capable of receiving it, which is the narrator. So Bartleby presents this obligation first in his specific eccentricities. Bartleby's specific characteristics played a particular part in rousing the narrator's attention, namely because they are so obscure. By simply preferring not to adhere to the conventions placed on him in favor of his own feelings about safety and security, he completely disrupts his place of work. Keeping with his ideals, he does not participate in the normal tasks of a copyist. The extreme contrast of Bartleby and his other employees obviously cannot be ignored by the narrator. In fact, this is what draws him in. He states that had there been the least uneasiness, anger, impatience, or impertinence in his manner, in other words, had there been anything ordinarily human, doubtless I should have violently dismissed him. But he admits Bartleby had a certain austere reserve about him that positively awed him into tame compliance. Bartleby's utter poverty is another thing that pulls him in, not just financially, but also of real human comfort and connection that rouses the first significant emotional reaction from the narrator. This is when he first begins to feel the weight of his human obligation. This stirs feelings in the narrator he's never experienced before, admitting the bond of humanity now drew me irresistibly to gloom, for I and Bartleby are both sons of Adam. Sorrow, then, is what draws us to each other, sympathy calling us to forfeit our comforts for the uncertain. Bartleby cannot simply be tied down to a character. He more parallels a metaphor representing the need in society for this obligation to be met. While the other characters in the story can be pinned to certain aspects of societal mechanics, the eccentric copyist exists conceptually outside of this realm, not abiding by its conventions and lacking normal characteristics to tie him down. Though his actions may be predictable, his motivations through the story are a mystery to the audience. As the narrator states, no material exists for a satisfactory biography. The ambiguities in the story create a curiosity in the reader, which leaves them more susceptible to his intentions, though they are never directly revealed. Bartleby the metaphor stands as a bold statement that is so fixed in his nature he causes others to ponder some aspect of their own. He represents a pull away from the default mechanical interaction and movement toward authentic connection. And then we have the narrator to answer that call. For Melville to fully capture that ideal, there must be a dynamic character that is capable of recognizing the natural pull of one man to another and realize the call this places on his humanity. And that's the narrator for us. Even though he struggles with the friction between moral and ideal, he can't escape the connection he has found in Bartleby. In the beginning of the story, the narrator focuses on his own ease and certainty. But upon Bartleby's arrival at the office, he develops a new objective, which is to attempt to understand and make account of the man before him. At times, this is his main focus, stating that to befriend Bartleby, to humor him, will cost me nothing, while I lay up in my soul what will eventually prove a sweet morsel for my conscience. Other times his focus remains more fixed on the way Bartleby may affect him, his business, him personally. As the story goes on, we see this pull he feels become less of an obligation and more of a driving force. Repeatedly, he is drawn back to Bartleby to show him sympathy, to elevate him however he may. But at every turn, the main character shuts him down, refusing any offer, and makes the preferring stick to. I'm sorry, and makes him preferring to stick the comfort he has found in being void of them. So what's the point? Why does the narrator keep trying to reach someone who does not want to be reached? In an article by Jeffrey Weinstock, he ponders the idea of justice, claiming that justice itself is not reasonable, that it demands the impossible. Doing justice to Bartleby or any other ghostly figure entails recognizing the impossibility of doing justice and, on the other hand, assuming the responsibility anyway, knowing that there will always be a remainder in undomesticated strangers. This is exactly what the narrator does in dealing with Bartleby. Even though he sees that this effort to reach his eccentric employees a loss on him, that there is still some obscurities that may remain as obstacles, he assumes this responsibility anyway. So what are we to do? The narrator's purpose in this story is to try to authenticate the existence of his elusive copyist, to atone for what he calls an irreparable loss to literature. The loss being that there was nothing authentic known of him, that he was never able to be reached or felt or connected, void of any comfort humanity may bring. While this may seem like a bleak ending, what the audience should take from this is that the obligation persists. As humans, we must still try. We must not allow ourselves to simply become mechanical pieces in the larger societal machine, automatic and complacent. If each of our own personal systems are to work in harmony, there must be room for accommodation.